10 p.m. A message from my downstairs neighbor popped up in a neighborhood group chat on my phone. It was a typical group for our apartment complex, where people often complained about noise, parking issues, or misplaced deliveries. Smoking on the balcony, huh? Guess your manners have gone out the window. My laundry's covered in ash from upstairs. I stared at the message, completely thrown. First, I don't smoke. Second, I'm not even home. I'm out of town on a business trip in Chicago. Then a photo got posted in the chat. The angle was from below, showing a large hand holding a lit cigarette, clearly extended over the railing of my balcony. The hand was prominent, unmistakably a man's. The timestamp said the picture was taken just 5 minutes ago. No way that's not from your place. I stared at my phone, my mind racing. The pale yellow ceiling and the half-burnt light bulb captured in the shot, it was undeniably my apartment in our mid-century modern complex in Denver. But I was sitting in a hotel room miles away. Panic set in as my thoughts scrambled. I quickly dialed my wife, Emily. The noise from the L train rattled in the background as I waited for her to pick up. The phone rang several times before she finally answered. "Hey, hon. Why are you calling so late?" I was already asleep. "No reason. Just missed you." Aren't you coming back the day after tomorrow? What have you been up to today?" "Nothing much, just work, then came home. It's been boring, really." "All right, well, get some sleep. You sound tired." "Yeah, I will. See you soon." As I hung up, I clenched my phone. Emily was always a light sleeper, waking up furious if my snoring disturbed her. And she never, ever went to bed before midnight, especially in the summer when she liked to stay up late watching Netflix. Something wasn't right. I briefly considered cursing out the neighbor in the chat. Maybe if I did, Emily would be forced to go upstairs and confront the situation. But logic kicked in. I needed to stay calm and figure out what was going on. So, I apologized to the neighbor in the chat, offering to cover any damages. Then, I sent him a $20 Amazon gift card as a peace offering. "Hey man, I'm not home. It's probably my brother staying over, smoking. I'll make sure to have a word with him when I'm back." The guy's tone softened after that. "All right, man. I didn't mean to make a fuss, but it's been 3 days straight now. I wouldn't have been this pissed otherwise." 3 days? What the hell? A headache pounded in my skull like someone was jabbing a rod through my brain. Ignoring the late hour, I dialed my boss. "Hey, I need to head home early, urgent family matter." When I arrived home the next morning, Emily was already at work. The apartment was a mess. The dining table was cluttered with leftovers, pizza, soda, and some half-eaten wings from the local barbecue joint. Emily usually preferred lighter meals, so the sight of greasy takeout was unusual. I glanced toward the balcony, and sure enough, there was a faint trace of ash wedged in the creases between the tiles. You wouldn't notice it unless you were looking for it. Stepping into the bedroom, a wave of heat surged to my head. The bed was a mess, sheets tangled as if someone had hastily gotten up. My mind couldn't help but replay scenes of what might have happened last night, and maybe the night before and the one before that. Anger simmered inside me as I resisted the urge to rip the sheets off the bed and throw them out. On the nightstand, Emily's tablet caught my eye. I never usually checked it, but this time I picked it up, intending to unlock it. That's when I noticed she had changed the password, and I had no idea when that happened. I hadn't forgotten to check the bathroom either. My razor, one I had carefully cleaned before I left, had been used. A fine layer of stubble lined the blade, something only noticeable if you were looking closely. A wave of nausea hit me as I tried to keep my composure. I texted Emily, telling her there was an issue with the project and that I need to stay a few more days. Her response came almost immediately, a sad emoji, followed by a message telling me she understood and to focus on work. She said she'd miss me. In the past, I'd have dropped everything to rush home to her. But now, I could see through the facade. She was probably relieved I wasn't coming back so soon. I checked into a hotel near our apartment, stowing my luggage there before taking a cab to the coffee shop near Emily's office. I knew her job well. It was one I'd helped her get through a friend. The pay was decent, and it was a 9 to 5, meaning no overtime and no crazy office drama. I waited in the coffee shop, knowing her routine, and sure enough, after a while, I saw Emily leaving work. She looked happy, catching a cab that headed in the opposite direction of home. Luckily, it was rush hour, and there were plenty of cabs. I quickly flagged one down and told the driver to follow her. Traffic was light, and we quickly made our way to the west side of town. Emily got out of the cab on a quiet street and walked straight into a small photography studio. Frank's Photography Studio read the sign above the door. I got out of the cab and slipped into a nearby alley, keeping a close eye on the studio. Through the glass door, I saw Emily, her back to me, talking to someone sitting in front of her. Annoyingly, the person was blocked from my view, hidden behind her. They talked for a moment, and then, to my shock, Emily playfully punched the person before bending down and sliding naturally onto his lap. Then they started kissing, completely oblivious to the world outside. A wave of dizziness hit me, my limbs going numb as if the blood had drained from my body. Knowing something in your gut is one thing, but seeing it with your own eyes is another. Last night, when things started feeling off, and even as I watched Emily get out of the cab just now, I had managed to stay calm. But deep down, that calmness was only because a part of me still didn't want to believe this was real. Now, the truth was staring me in the face, undeniable. My expression must have been worse than if I'd just swallowed something foul. There were moments when I wanted to just burst in there, consequences be damned, and take care of this right then and there. But I held back. Not yet. I kept telling myself it wasn't time to blow everything up. After what felt like an eternity, Emily and that guy finally pulled apart. They both stood up, getting ready to leave. I squinted, trying to get a better look as they prepared to head out. I'd already made up my mind. If they dared to take this back to our home, I'd be right behind them, ready to lock them in and call her parents to catch them in the act. But to my surprise, only Emily walked out. The guy didn't follow her. I had even gone to the trouble of telling Emily I'd be away for a few more days, hoping they'd slip up again. But now my plan to catch them red-handed was slipping through my fingers. A strange sense of disappointment welled up inside me, even though I knew it was irrational. I finally got a good look at the guy. He wasn't bad-looking, just your typical pretty boy, the kind who probably had more time for the gym than real work. I didn't rush to leave. Instead, I stayed hidden across the street, trying to figure out how to get more information on this guy. After all, he had been to my house. He might have seen my photos and could recognize me. But despite everything, today hadn't been a total loss. At least now I knew where this pretty boy operated. I had pinpointed his base of operations. After standing for a while, my legs started to ache, so I sat down on the curb, keeping my eyes on him as he worked at his computer. My mind was racing, trying to plan my next move. I sat there for over half an hour, just watching, when a girl with wavy hair, wearing a crop top and a mini skirt, strutted into the studio. At first, I thought she was just another customer, but she immediately threw herself onto him as soon as she walked in. This one was even bolder than Emily, plopping right onto his lap in that tiny skirt. She wore heavy smoky eye makeup, bright red lipstick, and oversized hoop earrings. An entirely different look from Emily. I should have seen this coming. People say money makes men stray, but sometimes it doesn't take much. Even a guy with nothing to his name can use a bit of charm to get what he wants. As I watched them, it struck me how dead quiet the place was. Not a single customer had come in the whole time I'd been there. No wonder this guy used it as his personal playground. One woman leaves, and another shows up right after. After watching them for a while, I started feeling sick to my stomach. The whole situation was too much, but I figured that sooner or later, I'd catch him again. There's no escaping me forever. With that thought, I decided to head back to the hotel. That evening, back in my room, I opened Yelp and searched for Frank's Photography Studio. Sure enough, I found it. The listing included a phone number. I saved the number and then opened up Facebook, where I searched for the business. It didn't take long to find a matching page under the same name, with a profile picture of some camera gear. I have a separate phone that I use strictly for work, so I used that to send a message to the business account pretending to inquire about getting some headshots done. While waiting for a response, I scrolled through Emily's social media. She's always been obsessed with posting photos of herself. But as I look back, I noticed something strange. About 6 months ago, her photo style had changed. Before, it was mostly selfies or pictures taken with her friends, heavily edited with filters from apps like Instagram. But more recently, the photos had a different feel. The quality had noticeably improved, even though the shot seemed casual and unposed. The lighting looked professional, almost like they were part of a personal photo shoot. As I kept scrolling through Emily's social media, I noticed a post from 3 months ago on Valentine's Day. She had shared a full-body photo of herself in a spaghetti-strap dress. The picture was stunning, but it wasn't taken by me. The caption read, "Hope I'm always the most beautiful in your eyes." That day, I had felt guilty about being away on a business trip, so I had a bouquet of her favorite flowers delivered to her. I thought it would be a thoughtful gesture to make up for my absence. Little did I know that while I was trying to show her how much I cared, she was blatantly flaunting her affair with this pretty boy right in front of me. It wasn't even subtle. This was a slap in the face. Just then, I noticed that the friend request I had sent to the photography studio's Facebook page had been accepted. The guy's profile didn't have much on it, mostly promotional posts for his business. I scrolled through quickly, but didn't find anything particularly useful. Then a message popped up. "Hi there." I started crafting my response. "Hello, I'm interested in scheduling a session for employee ID photos. We have a large team, so the exact timing isn't set yet, but I wanted to touch base with you in advance. Can I reach out once we finalize the details?" He replied almost instantly with a surprised emoji, clearly excited at the prospect of landing such a big job. "Sure thing, that sounds great. Just let me know when you're ready, and we'll make it happen." Of course, he would jump at the chance. There's no way he'd let a deal like this slip through his fingers. Unable to sleep, I found myself scrolling through Emily's social media again. This time, I opened her Instagram account, which she used to post pretty much the same content as on her other platforms. I rarely bothered with it before, but tonight I decided to dig deeper. Starting from 6 months ago, I began to comb through her posts. She was relentless, posting 3 or 4 times a day. I forced myself to go through every single one, not skipping a single comment. After about an hour of this tedious search, I finally spotted something suspicious. Under a post where she had taken a close-up selfie, there was a comment from an account named Frank W. Photo. The profile picture was a black and white side profile, oozing pretentiousness. The comment itself was just a single emoji, a thumbs up. I immediately clicked on the profile. The account was filled with photos of beautiful women, all professionally shot. The bio confirmed it. Freelance photographer for hire. The name, the content, it all lined up perfectly. My Instagram account had always been a ghost town. I'd never posted anything. But tonight I decided to change that. I updated my profile with a new username, something feminine and sweet. Jasmine Bloom. I picked a profile picture of an attractive woman, making sure it looked convincing. Before doing anything else, I made sure to block Emily first, just in case. Then, I sent a direct message to Frank. "Hey there, I'm interested in booking a photo shoot with you. How do we set it up?" After sending the message, I waited for a response. When none came after a while, I decided to call it a night and get some sleep. The next morning, I was jolted awake by my phone ringing. It was Emily. "Hey, when are you coming back? My parents want to have dinner with you once you're home." Her parents inviting me to dinner? Even half asleep, I could guess what this was about. Emily had the nerve to cheat on me and still ask for that money. Her brother was a total freeloader, always leaning on his parents for support. He'd just finished school and was already struggling with his bills. But he was angling for a new car or some other luxury he couldn't afford. His parents were constantly trying to bail him out, and ever since they found out I had some savings, Emily hadn't stopped hinting about it. Her argument was always the same. "He's my only brother, and my parents did so much for us growing up. Marrying me means you are part of the family, and it's your duty to help out." I was completely against the idea of draining our savings to fund her brother's poor decisions. So I kept telling her the money was tied up in investments and couldn't be easily accessed. This had led to more than a few arguments between us. After agreeing to Emily's dinner invitation, I opened Instagram to check for a response from Frank. Still nothing. I was starting to wonder if I had messaged the wrong person. As for Emily's parents, our relationship was cordial, but nothing special. They weren't particularly warm, but they also weren't cold. Up until now, I hadn't given them a clear answer about the money, mostly because I didn't want to create any tension in the family. But now I didn't have to worry about that anymore. I decided that dinner would be the perfect opportunity to make things clear. There was no way I was lending them any money. Once they found out what their daughter had been up to, I figured they wouldn't have much ground to criticize me anyway. After checking out of the hotel and heading back home, I found that the apartment was spotless. There were no signs that anyone else had been there. Emily had clearly made sure everything was in perfect order before heading to work. I decided to call Emily's mom, and she invited me over to their house for dinner. When I arrived, both of them greeted me warmly, but I could sense the underlying tension in the air. As we sat down in their cozy living room, her father poured us some wine, saying he had been looking forward to catching up with me. Her mother, smiling, mentioned how hard I must be working, always traveling for business, and how they had prepared all my favorite dishes just for tonight. As the evening wore on and the wine began to loosen tongues, her father leaned in and, with a slightly slurred voice, brought up our wedding. He asked if they had ever made things difficult for me when I married their daughter. I smiled politely and nodded, knowing where this conversation was heading. In truth, they hadn't asked much of me at the time, certainly nothing about dowries or financial obligations, but that was mostly because they knew I had a stable job and wasn't struggling financially. Her mother gently nudged her father, steering the conversation toward the real issue. She praised me for being a good man and said that their daughter had chosen well because of my character. I kept smiling, but didn't say much, waiting for them to get to the point. Finally, her father got to the heart of the matter. He mentioned that her brother had run into some trouble with a loan and that they needed to help him pay it off before things got worse. Her mother chimed in, saying that families should always support each other and that if I could help them out this time, they'd be there for us in the future, especially if we ever needed help with anything like starting a family. I nodded politely and offered vague reassurances, but I made sure not to commit to anything. There was no way I was going to lend them the money. As the dinner progressed, I could sense that Emily's father was becoming increasingly frustrated. Finally, he muttered something about needing to use the bathroom and stood up. On his way out, he exchanged a quick look with Emily's mom, who promptly followed him out of the room. Once they were gone, I noticed that her father's phone, left on the table, had lit up with a message. The screen read, "Dad, have you finished dinner yet?" Did he agree? The response was swift. He's not willing. That's fine, I'm done waiting. The message was from Emily. I couldn't quite grasp what done waiting meant. My heart was pounding, and though I knew it was wrong, I couldn't stop myself. I picked up her father's phone and swiped to unlock it. Thankfully, there was no password, allowing me to see their entire conversation, a chat between father and daughter that made my blood run cold. I scrolled up, and as I read, it became painfully clear. Emily's father had known all along about her affair. The messages revealed a twisted plan. The gist of it was simple. Her father wanted to borrow the $50,000 from me first. Then if Emily wanted to divorce me afterward, they'd only have to repay half of it since it would be considered marital property. And if Emily played her cards right, they might not have to pay me anything at all. My temples were pounding, pulsing with anger and disbelief. I couldn't make sense of it, but I was completely floored. What kind of twisted scheme was this? I kept scrolling through the messages, my movements almost robotic. The conversation was mostly about money, specifically their endless plotting to squeeze money out of me. Then I came across the part where Emily had come clean to her father, admitting that she was seeing someone else. She bluntly told him that she didn't want to stay in the marriage, no matter how angry they got. At first, her father had tried to talk her out of it, but eventually, he just gave up. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was reading. This was next-level manipulation. What kind of parents were these? What kind of father-in-law goes to such lengths to deceive his son-in-law? What kind of family does this? If I hadn't uncovered Emily's affair, if I hadn't seen the true colors of this family, I might have actually given them the money. Maybe not the full $50,000, but definitely $10,000 or $20,000, thinking I was helping them out. And then what? Emily would divorce me, run straight into her lover's arms, and her family would take my money and use it to pay off their debts. I'd be left alone, completely in the dark, having been played by this disgusting, conniving family. The door to the room moved, and I quickly put the phone back in its place. Emily's father walked back in, his face dark with frustration, clearly ready to say something stern. Before he could get a word out, I cut him off. "Dad, I made up my mind. I'm going to take out the $50,000 to help pay off Ryan's loan. Emily's father's face was a mix of shock and disbelief. The words of reprimand that had been forming on his lips were suddenly swallowed, replaced by a stunned silence. The shock was so intense that he started coughing violently, nearly choking on his own spit. I quickly rushed over, playing the dutiful son-in-law, patting his back to help him recover. "Are you serious, Mike? You really mean it?" he asked, his voice still rough from the coughing. I nodded firmly, watching as their expressions shifted from disbelief to sheer joy. The speed with which they changed their tune was almost comical, like something out of a stage play. In that moment, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, like I had just channeled some masterful manipulator from a drama. I had them exactly where I wanted them. I couldn't help but wonder if Emily had gotten some instructions from her parents because that evening, she was unusually affectionate when I got home. But I couldn't shake the disgust gnawing at me, so I claimed I had an upset stomach and retreated to the bathroom. She seemed almost relieved, immediately grabbing her phone and settling onto the couch without a second thought. Sitting on the toilet, I pulled out my phone and opened Instagram. Finally, there was a response to the message I had sent earlier. Ever since I had agreed to help with the loan, Emily's entire family had been treating me better than ever, practically putting me on a pedestal. I kept delaying the payment, using the excuse that my investments had a month left before they matured. Meanwhile, I continued my little game with Frank. Using my fake Jasmine Bloom Instagram account, I flirted with him occasionally, keeping him interested. At the same time, I kept in touch with him through my work account, pretending to be a potential big client. Frank dropped his aloof attitude once he smelled the possibility of a lucrative deal and started chatting with me normally. During our conversations, I learned that he and his girlfriend were from the same small town and had moved to the city together to make it big. He had his photography studio, and she had opened a nail salon. I thought about the girl with the wavy hair I had seen before and couldn't imagine her doing nails for clients. So, I casually suggested, "I should send my wife over to your girlfriend's salon. Maybe she could offer a little discount." To my surprise, Frank actually gave me his girlfriend's contact info. Her profile picture was of a soft-looking, homely girl, a stark contrast to the wild woman I had seen with him before. This didn't add up. Curious, I used my fake account to add her and introduce myself as someone interested in getting my nails done. She accepted the request, and as I browsed through her profile, I found a photo of her and Frank together, arms around each other. It was definitely him. I studied the picture for a long time, scrutinizing every detail. Finally, I reached a conclusion. This was absolutely not the same woman as the one with the wavy hair. This homely girl was entirely different from the flashy one I had seen before. During this time, I made sure to act like I was on top of the world at home. My attitude toward Emily shifted drastically. I no longer treated her with the same care as before. When she couldn't hold back anymore and started arguments, I didn't bother trying to smooth things over like I used to. Instead, I kept her under close watch, making it nearly impossible for her to sneak off and meet Frank. If she said she had to work late, I'd insist on waiting outside her office to make sure she got home safely. If she mentioned meeting up with a friend, I'd offer to come along as the photographer and bag holder. If she wanted to go out for dinner with her friends, I'd say, "I should meet your friends too. Let's all go together." As a result, Emily was boiling with frustration, but with the $50,000 on the line, she didn't dare confront me outright. I kept this up for about a week until I could see that Emily's anger was ready to explode. That's when I casually mentioned that I had an upcoming business trip. Sure enough, after dealing with me for days, the moment I left, she couldn't contain herself any longer. I rented a car and started tailing her. This time, instead of sneaking off to our place, she and Frank went straight to a hotel. Perfect. They hadn't seen each other in days, so I knew they wouldn't be in any rush to leave. I quickly texted the hotel's address and room number to Frank's girlfriend, the one I had nicknamed Curly for her wild hair. I added, "Hey, just thought you should know your boyfriend Frank is here at this hotel with another woman." To sweeten the deal, I attached a photo of Emily and Frank holding hands as they walked into the hotel together. Curly didn't disappoint. Within half an hour, she was there, and I watched from the stairwell as she stormed up to the door. She pounded on it with both fists, shouting and cursing, but no one answered. If they didn't open the door, Frank would have time to come up with some excuse or sneak out another way. The whole confrontation would be wasted. Just then, a housekeeping lady happened to walk by with a master key card in hand. Without missing a beat, Curly grabbed the card from her and swiped the door open. I nearly shouted in triumph. This was better than I could have hoped for. What followed next was pure chaos. From inside the room, I heard Emily scream, followed by Curly's furious yelling. The housekeeping lady, who had her key card snatched from her hand, looked a bit startled for a moment, but seeing the ruckus inside, she didn't panic. Instead, she calmly reached for her walkie-talkie to notify the front desk. Her calm demeanor made me wonder just how many of these kinds of scenes she had witnessed to be so unfazed. I kept my mask on and pretended to be a guest just passing by, but the noise coming from the room was too intriguing. I discreetly positioned myself behind the housekeeping lady, using her as cover while I recorded the whole thing. Curly was a force to be reckoned with. Frank hadn't even had time to pull his pants up before she shoved him under the table with one powerful push. Then, with one hand gripping Emily's hair and the other delivering slaps left and right, she didn't miss a beat, shouting insults all the while. "Old woman, you don't even know whose man you're messing with. Are you trying to get yourself killed?" After delivering a dozen slaps, Curly must have decided her hand was getting sore. She slipped off one of her high heels and started hitting Emily with the shoe. Frank, trying to intervene, got caught up in the attack. At one point, the thin heel of the shoe seemed to poke him in the eye, making him yelp and drop to the floor, clutching his face. Emily, meanwhile, was barely dressed, only managing to cover herself with a towel. With one hand occupied holding the towel, her ability to fight back was significantly weakened, and she could only feebly block the blows with her free hand. Just as things were getting out of hand, the front desk staff arrived. I quickly put my phone away and made my exit, not wanting to get caught up in the scene. I didn't go far, though. Instead, I parked nearby and waited in my car, watching from a distance. About 20 minutes later, I saw Curly emerge from the hotel, dragging Frank by his ear. 5 minutes after that, Emily came out, her head hanging low, clearly shaken. I followed her discreetly as she made her way back home. Once she was inside, I decided to give her a call. As expected, she didn't pick up, so I tried a video call. She declined that too. Finally, she texted me, "I'm tired. Stop bothering me." I replied calmly, "Babe, I just wanted to let you know that my business trip ended early. I'm actually on my way home right now." There was a long pause before she responded. "Why so early?" "Yeah, I thought I'd surprise you. Aren't you happy to see me?" I texted back. Another pause. Then, after a few minutes, I spotted her leaving our apartment building, hastily throwing on a mask and rushing to catch a cab. She looked like she was trying to make a quick getaway. Right then, a new message popped up on my phone. "I'm going to my mom's place." "Oh, is that so?" I texted back. "Well, I'll come pick you up tomorrow. Let's talk tomorrow. I'm going to sleep," she replied, clearly trying to end the conversation. Emily hid out at her parents' place for a few days, avoiding me at every turn. Every time I suggested coming over to see her, she came up with some excuse to keep me away. She was tired, her mom needed help, they had family over, you name it. But after nearly a week, she started running out of reasons to stay away. Eventually, it got to the point where she couldn't avoid coming home any longer. That night, while Emily was in the shower, I took the opportunity to unlock her tablet. I had managed to catch a glimpse of her password a few days ago. I started scrolling through her WeChat, looking for any conversations with Frank, but there was nothing, no chat history, and even her contact list was clean. No sign of Frank, either under his real account or any alias. Then it hit me. I checked the blocked contacts, and there it was, Frank's account quietly sitting in her blacklist. I wasn't surprised that they hadn't completely cut ties. Something told me they were just being more discreet. The next day, Curly surprised me by sending a message. I dumped his sorry ass. "Good riddance." I replied with a thumbs-up emoji, impressed. For all her rough exterior, she had just shown me a side of her that I hadn't expected. She knew what she wanted and didn't hesitate to cut ties when she needed to. It made me reflect on people. Curly, despite her appearance, had principles. She didn't drag things out and wasn't afraid to take decisive action. On the other hand, Emily, who everyone around us saw as the perfect, innocent wife, had been sneaking around behind my back. Worse still, she had planned to cheat me out of my money before running off with her lover. A couple of days after she returned, I overheard her talking quietly on the phone in the kitchen. I couldn't catch every word, but the tone was unmistakable. It was Frank. He was apologizing, pleading for another chance. Emily, initially cold, slowly softened, and by the end of the conversation, it was clear they had made up. I could feel my blood boiling, but I kept my cool. I knew that the real game wasn't over yet. The next day, I got a call from Emily's mom. She started off with small talk, asking how things were going, before getting to the point. "Mike, dear, about that money we talked about. We really need it soon. Ryan's situation isn't getting any better, and we need to take care of that loan before it spirals out of control." I could hear the urgency in her voice, but I wasn't about to let them see me sweat. I played along, acting concerned and saying I understood the importance. "I'm working on it," I assured her. "I just need a little more time to move things around." Her tone became more insistent. "Mike, we really need to settle this soon. It's important for the family. We're counting on you." I promised to do my best, but inside, I knew I was playing for time. Emily and Frank might think they're back on solid ground, but I wasn't about to hand over that money and let them walk away scot-free. After a few more days of carefully playing my role, Emily's mom called again, this time suggesting we settle everything at an upcoming family gathering. "It'll be the perfect opportunity," she said. "The whole family will be there, and we can finally get this all sorted out." I agreed, knowing full well what I planned to do. The day of the gathering, Emily and I arrived at her parents' house, where the extended family was already assembled. Her relatives were all smiles, engaging in casual conversations as the scent of home-cooked food filled the air. I made sure to keep my demeanor calm and collected, playing the part of the dutiful husband, even though inside, I was ready for the show to begin. As we sat down for dinner, I could feel the anticipation in the room. Emily's parents were clearly eager to finalize the deal, with her father giving me encouraging nods throughout the meal. I let them stew for a bit, making small talk and laughing along with everyone else, while subtly keeping an eye on Emily. She seemed tense, but was putting on a brave face for the family. Finally, as dessert was being served, Emily's dad cleared his throat and brought up the money. "Mike, we were hoping we could settle everything tonight. It would really take a load off our minds," he said, with an air of someone expecting a favor to be granted. I nodded thoughtfully, drawing out the suspense. "Of course," I replied smoothly. "I brought everything we need to finalize it." Standing up, I reached into my bag and pulled out a small USB drive. "But before we get to that, there's something I need to share with everyone. I've been working on a little project, and I think now's the perfect time to share it." Curiosity flickered across the faces around the table, but no one suspected what was coming. I walked over to the TV, plugged in the drive, and turned it on. I made a show of fumbling with the remote, pretending to struggle with the settings. "I think I've got it," I said, as I finally managed to hit play. The room fell into a stunned silence as the video started. At first, the footage was shaky, showing the exterior of the hotel. Then, the camera panned up, clearly capturing Emily and Frank holding hands as they entered the building together. The image was unmistakable. Gasps rippled through the room. Emily's face drained of all color, and she looked like she was about to collapse. Her father's fork clattered to his plate, his eyes wide with shock. Her mother covered her mouth, her expression a mixture of horror and disbelief. The video continued, showing the two of them entering the hotel room. As the door closed behind them, the screen went black, and then switched to the next clip, the chaotic scene with Curly bursting into the room, Emily and Frank scrambling in panic. I turned to face the room, doing my best to look heartbroken and devastated. "I didn't know. I had no idea this was happening," I said, my voice shaking with feigned disbelief. "How could this happen? Emily, how could you?" Emily's eyes filled with tears, and she looked around the room, seeing nothing but shock and judgment on every face. Her father opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her mother looked as if she might faint. I was ready to help this family. I continued, letting the emotion build in my voice. "I was ready to support you all, to give you everything you needed, but now, Now I don't know what to think. How could you betray me like this? The room erupted into chaos. Relatives were whispering, some were outright talking, and others were shaking their heads in disbelief. The atmosphere of celebration had completely shattered. Emily's father, finally finding his voice, tried to stammer out an explanation, but it was clear that nothing he said could fix this. Emily, now openly crying, tried to reach out to me. Mike, please, I can explain. But I stepped back, shaking my head. Explain? How do you explain this? You've been lying to me, using me, and now you expect me to just hand over the money? After this? Her mother's face crumpled, and her father was at a loss for words. The carefully constructed plan they had been working on was crumbling before their eyes, exposed for all to see. I trusted you, I said, addressing Emily directly. And this is how you repay me? By going behind my back and betraying everything we had. The room was in turmoil, and I knew there was no coming back from this for any of them. They had played their hand, and I had just laid down the winning card. As the reality of the situation sank in, I made my move. I need some time to think, I said, my voice cold and distant. I can't stay here right now. Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the house, leaving behind a family that had been thoroughly exposed, with no money and no way to recover from the fallout I had just unleashed. That night, Emily didn't come home. Instead, her parents showed up at our door. As they sat down, I could see the desperation in their eyes, but they tried to mask it with feigned concern. Mike, her father started, his voice steady but with an edge of nervousness, about that video. You have to understand, someone is clearly trying to sabotage Emily. This is all a setup. Someone must have doctored that footage to make it look like something it's not. You can't seriously believe that, can you? I sat there silently, letting them dig themselves deeper, their explanations growing more frantic as they spoke. When they finally paused, waiting for my response, I calmly began. 2 months ago, I came back from a business trip and noticed something strange, I said, my voice level. Someone had been smoking in the house, something I never do. My razor had been used, even though I hadn't touched it. At the time, I thought it was odd but didn't dwell on it. But now, looking back, it's clear that something was going on long before today. Today's video isn't the first sign. It's just the most blatant. They looked stunned, but before they could say anything, I pulled out my phone and showed them the group chat from that day, the one where the neighbor had complained about the smoking. This is from our neighborhood group chat, I said. At the time, I shrugged it off. But now, with everything that's come to light, it's obvious. Emily's parents exchanged a panicked look, their attempts at denial crumbling. That man, whoever he is, must have planned this from the start, her mother exclaimed, her voice shaky. He's trying to tear this family apart. Please, Mike, don't fall for his tricks. I listened quietly, letting them spin their stories, pretending to be heartbroken and confused. But no matter how much they tried to persuade me, I kept up the facade of being too overwhelmed to respond. As the night wore on, her mother broke down into tears, resorting to emotional blackmail. We'll make sure Emily learns her lesson, she sobbed. We promise she'll never make a mistake like this again. Just give her another chance. Please, Mike. She's our daughter, and we'll make sure she understands how much she hurt you. In another time, in another life, I might have believed them. If I hadn't seen their text messages, if I hadn't known what they were truly capable of, I might have softened. I might have caved and agreed to forgive and forget. But I knew better now. No matter how many tears they shed or how sincere they tried to appear, I remained unmoved. After hours of pleading and bargaining, they finally realized there was nothing more they could do. Defeated, they left, knowing full well that the $50,000 they were counting on was never coming. After the divorce, Emily's social media was a constant stream of happy posts, selfies, dining out, visiting new spots. She hadn't blocked me, and I hadn't blocked her either. It was as if she was trying to prove to me, and maybe to herself, that she was better off without me, living her best life. 2 weeks later, Emily's birthday rolled around. I had a hunch she'd spend it with Frank, given that her family wasn't too fond of her anymore after her brother's hopes of paying off his loan fell apart. With no warm welcome from them, She was likely looking for comfort elsewhere. That morning, I decided to bait Frank, texting him casually. "What's the plan for today?" "Got an outdoor shoot with a client this afternoon," he replied. That was all I needed to know. Around midday, I parked myself outside his studio, waiting. Sure enough, Frank eventually emerged, and I tailed him as he made his way to a Japanese restaurant in the city. As I suspected, Emily was already there, waiting by the entrance. When she saw him, she smiled and looped her arm through his, and they walked inside together. I snapped a few photos. It hit me how much my life had changed over the past 2 months. I had essentially turned into a private investigator, a paparazzo in my own life. If I ever lost my job, maybe this would be my new calling. I sent the pictures to Frank's girlfriend, the one I'd identified as a soft-looking, homely woman, using the fake Jasmine Bloom Instagram account. "Hey, are you and Frank at the Japanese place on Colfax Avenue? What a coincidence. My husband and I are here too." Her response was a simple, confused question mark. I played innocent. "Just now my husband said he saw Frank going in with a girl." "That was you, right?" I didn't waste any time. I sent the pictures of Frank and Emily together. "Oh, must be my mistake," I added, quickly retracting the photos as if in a panic. "You know what? Forget I said anything. Sorry. Not sorry at all. I wasn't doing this to hurt her. I was trying to save her from a life with a guy like Frank." As I waited outside, I refreshed Emily's Instagram feed. She had just posted a story, a picture of herself with her eyes closed, making a wish in front of a birthday cake with lit candles. The caption read, "Letting go of the wrong to make room for the right." Clearly, I was the wrong, and Frank was the right. About 40 minutes later, I realized I hadn't noticed the girlfriend going inside, but suddenly, the restaurant grew loud with commotion. I quickly made my way to the entrance and peeked inside. Emily was standing there, hands on her hips, screaming at Frank's girlfriend, who didn't seem fazed in the slightest. She was demanding that Frank explain what was going on. Frank, of course, was desperately trying to de-escalate the situation. He grabbed his girlfriend's arm, trying to drag her away, but Emily blocked his path. She was confident this time, convinced she was the official girlfriend now that she was single and had nothing to hide. But Frank's girlfriend wasn't like the fiery Curly. She wasn't going to throw punches. She just looked at Frank with a mix of pity and disgust, having already pieced together what had been going on. Without a word, she turned and walked out, leaving him behind without a second thought. Panic set in for Frank. He tried to follow her, but Emily wasn't done yet. "If you walk out that door, we're finished," she yelled, her voice shaking with desperation. Frank, clearly out of patience, yanked his arm free from Emily's grip. "You think I'm going to marry you? Get real. You're just a fling, nothing more." Emily stood there, stunned. The fantasy she'd built up in her mind crumbled in an instant. She had thought Frank was her true love, but in reality, she was just a convenient distraction, a plaything for when he had nothing better to do. As Frank's girlfriend walked past me, she didn't even glance my way, her face set in determined resignation. When Frank came rushing out after her, I couldn't resist. I stuck my foot out just enough to trip him. He went down hard, sprawling on the pavement in a perfect display of humiliation. I casually turned and walked away, hearing the murmurs and whispers from passers-by as they watched Frank struggle to pick himself up off the ground. As I walked away from the chaos outside the restaurant on Colfax Avenue, I felt a strange sense of closure. The past few months had been a whirlwind of deception, betrayal, and carefully orchestrated payback. But now, watching Frank pick himself up from the pavement, with Emily's world unraveling behind him, I knew it was time to let it all go. They had played their games, and I had played mine, but now the game was over. It was time to move forward, to finally close this chapter of my life and start writing a new one, free from the toxic ties that had bound me for far too long. As I stepped into my car and drove away, the city lights of Denver reflecting in my rearview mirror, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was mine to shape.